You're watching Experience Comic Culture and Sales. Streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
2, 1.
Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell appeared to freeze up again today. He was answering questions for a reporter at a press conference in Kentucky, and he was asked if he planned on running for re-election in 2026. Now, he started to answer and then just stopped and stared for a while as one of his assistants came up, asked if he heard the question, and he continued to stare for about 30 seconds before finally going on. It was a very unnerving thing to watch. And this isn't the first time. Last month, an incident like this happened on the Capitol. He was in a press conference, got asked a question, started answering, and then froze and eventually got walked away by another senator. He returned a few minutes later saying he was fine, but the man is 81 years old. And earlier this year, he fell and had a concussion, spent time in the hospital before finally returning to the Senate. Other news outlets report that he tripped and fell at Reagan National Airport last month. I don't like to do politics on the show, but to me, this isn't politics. We're talking about aging senators. And you can throw California Senator Dianne Feinstein in as well. We can't be so dead set against the other party that we're forcing people in their final years to continue working when it's obvious they should be home with their families. This is bordering on elder abuse. If they're physically and mentally still capable, that's one thing, but we have to be willing to step in when they're not. And right now, our leaders aren't. Stay tuned for the Dan Wickline Show. Welcome to the Dan Wickline Show here on The Experience. Today is Wednesday, August 30th. This month is just about over and the year is ending quickly. Now, yesterday we had a great show. We talked about Jack Kirby. Some of you caught it on replay like Clayton, and I appreciate the kind words there, Clayton. Others of you caught it live, and we had fun, and it kind of inspired me for today's show, which is I kind of wanted to talk more about the characters Jack created. So, excuse me. Today's key collectibles are all villains that Jack Kirby created. And that ends up leading me to the topic of what are the best comic book villains of all time, the 20 best. So that is today's topic. It's a mix of Marvel, DC, and one, well, I guess he's technically DC, but maybe outside of continuity most of the time. Well, so we're going to get to that, but we got a bunch of news to cover. So we're going to cover the news, and then we'll take the break, and then we'll talk 20 best villains. And you guys got to tell me if I missed somebody, if you don't think somebody should be on the list. I'm not doing anti-heroes, so there's no Venom, no Harley Quinn, and no Catwoman. All of them I consider to be anti-heroes at this point because they spend just as much time being good guys as they do bad guys now. So let's see, we got Clayton here, we got Triple B, we got Jay, and with Jay there, JD is on the board. Joe Clayton, is that Clayton the same? Sorting Comics, watching my favorite show. Well, thank you, Joe. Joe, that's very cool. And like I said, JD's here, so we're going to dive right into the news. And this one's more of an opinion, but yeah, excited to hear your list. Same, yes. Okay, cool. Now let's start with, I think it's time to accept something. That most people don't like Ezra Miller's portrayal of the Flash. And I'm not saying everybody, there's people out there that love it. There are people out there that love everything Snyderverse. And there's people out there who hate everything Snyderverse. But I say this knowing that there's probably going to be some backlash, but the recent numbers say that 1.1 million people have watched The Flash in the first 3 days that it was on Max. 1.2 million watched Black Adam in the first 3 days. Now, during its theatrical run, Black Adam made $393 million. Flash made $268 million. Neither one is considered a success. But that means quite a few more people saw Black Adam in the theaters, and still more of them have watched Black Adam on Max than The Flash. Now, I know The Flash, a lot of people are saying The Flash is a bad movie. And probably if you didn't think it was going to be a bad movie, you went and saw it in the theater. But there is this natural curiosity about bad movies that when it's suddenly on a streaming service you already pay for, you're likely to watch it just to see if it's as bad as people think. It's kind of like when somebody hands you something and goes, taste this, it's horrible. And you go, okay. That's bad movie watching. Well, people aren't doing that. They're not curious. And this is a movie that had Michael Keaton returning as Batman, a Batman that so many people love, except for James Gunn, it seems. And anyway, so this really tells us that it's got to be Ezra Miller and all the things that they did outside of it and their portrayal of the character. So, yeah, I'm curious if any of you have seen it. Did you see it in the theater? Did you wait to see it when it was on Max? Have you bothered? Do you plan to bother it? Tell me in the chat. What are your guys' feelings on The Flash? And if you've seen it and you like it or you don't like it, I'd love to know that too. So, all right, we're going to move on. We get a little deeper into David Ayer and his feelings about the Suicide Squad movie, because he was on a podcast with, I want to say it was John Bernthal. John Bernthal has a podcast called The Real Ones, and David Ayer was on it, and he was talking about the Suicide Squad movie, and we get kind of an idea of what happened to it. Because he's always talked about, hey, how he's made a movie he's very happy with, and then the studio put out a movie that he can't stand. So I'm going to read this pretty much word for word. It says, Hollywood, I tell people, is like watching someone you love get, let me say, effed by someone you hate. The big one is Suicide Squad. That S broke me. That handed me my ass. Coming right off of Fury. I had the town in my hand. Could have done anything, and I did do anything. And I go on this journey with the Suicide Squad. And the same thing, authentic, truthful. Let's do all the rehearsal. Let's really get in each other's souls. Let's create this amazing collaborative thing, right? And then Deadpool opened. And they never tested Batman v Superman, so they were expecting a different result. And then they got hammered by all the critics. Then it's like, okay, we're going to turn David Ayer's dark, soulful movie into a comedy now. If all of that is true, that is horrible. That this guy made one kind of movie, and producers and studio execs recut it to make it a comedy, and it wasn't that funny. It wasn't a bad movie. I remember seeing it in the theater, but it definitely had its issues. So if there is a cut that's done as a dark, soulful movie, as Ayers explained, then they really should release it. Just put it on Max. You know, I mean, it seems like at least 1.1 million people are going to watch it. Clayton says, I saw it in the theaters and 3 times since on Max. I love it. Just got to ignore the one bad apple. All right. Jay says, wasn't the greatest superhero movie, but I didn't personally feel it was as bad as people say. Yeah. I'm just not. I have not appreciated Ezra's take on the character, so that's my hesitation to watch it. That, and I've seen part of it, and the special effects and the ending are really bad. And the baby catching scene, I don't know. I will eventually watch it. JD says, I'll go with Michael Shannon's take. It wasn't really a movie. It was someone playing with action figures. Fair enough. Clayton says, I always assume that movies will be different from the comics. The guy that wrote whatever comic isn't the guy adapting the movie. So it's going to be its own thing. Bring on all the comic movies. Now, see, I agree with you with that. I learned to control my expectations in the oddest way. Many, 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 many years ago, I went to a convention. This is before I had even put out my first comic. I went to a convention in LA, and I got to see Todd McFarlane. And Spawn #1 had just come out. Was it Spawn #1 just come out? Well, they were already talking about the movie, so it might have been a little later. But he was talking about a couple different things. And one of the things he said, yeah, it had to be later because they had the HBO show and they were talking about the movie. And McFarlane's, when somebody asked, well, why is D.B. Sweeney going to be Al? Why is D.B. Sweeney in it? You know, why are they race swapping, stuff like that? And McFarlane said, the comic books are the comic books. The animated series is the animated series. The movie is the movie. They shouldn't be the same thing. Why, if you've already read the comics, do you then want to see it as an animated movie or as a feature film, live action film? Don't you want it to change? Don't you not want to know what's going to happen? And when someone sits down to make a movie version, adapting it, they're making their version of it and whatever their vision is. So you let them artistically go. So I came away from that. That's one of the interesting things that I picked up from McFarlane that weekend. And I thought it was a great answer because it shouldn't be the exact same thing. It's like when they come out and they say, we're going to make Civil War. Well, they made the MCU version of Civil War that fits within the cohesive universe. They didn't try to make the one from the comics because it would be impossible. There's too many characters that appear that have never been introduced. Too big of a story. So, let's see. Jay says, if it's too close to the books, people complain. If it's too far from the books, people complain. My conclusion, people are the problem. They are. And I saw it. I've already seen YouTube videos out there saying, "Is Ahsoka bad? Why is Ahsoka bombing and all this stuff?" And it's like there's 3 episodes out of Ahsoka, and the 3rd one just came out. So why are people putting out these negative things? Well, the people are putting out negative reviews and negative headlines because that's what people are clicking on. And people are clicking on it because they want to see things fail. We are the weirdest race ever. We are the weirdest people because we love an underdog story. We love to see someone climb up. And then once they get there, we want to see them fall. And collectively as a society. So we're the ones clicking on these headlines. If we don't click on them, if we don't watch them, then they're going to stop making them. So if you're watching something, you're putting your time and effort into it, and you choose to watch negative content, then it's going to keep making negative content. And if you want to look for positive content, then you're more likely to get positive content. Just the way it works. That HBO show is the best. It was very cool. Terry, not Al. Thank you, Jay. JD says, do not say that where Jenna can hear you. And Jenna pops up as I summon. What did I say that Jenna? Why was Jenna summoned? What did I miss? That's got to get the clicks. Yeah. Oh. I felt it in the force. We were talking Civil War. My lawyer isn't here. Okay. All right. Let's get on to the next news story. Hulu has canceled The Great after 3 seasons. This is a series that starred Ellie Fanning and Nicholas Hoult, and it told the story of Catherine the Great from kind of an odd perspective. It didn't just look at it from the historical moments. It looked at it as more of a realistic set of people. I mean, the whole 3rd season that came out just kind of focused on, this just released on the 12th of May, it focused on the relationship between Catherine and Nicholas and them working on their marriage. So it's just kind of interesting because you don't think of, well, these two people are historical figures. You don't think about how they had rough spots in their marriage. You know, it would like be doing a romantic comedy with Abraham Lincoln and Mary Todd. That's not a bad idea, actually. Though I'd say you end it before he becomes president. Yeah. Changes the tone once. Yeah. But this series, The Great, got a lot of positive reviews. It got 7 Emmy nominations, and Hulu just pulled the plug on it. Maybe it's too expensive. I don't know. It felt more like an ending than canceled. Okay. I haven't watched it enough to know, but yeah, they're referring to it as canceled, but yeah, that could be that it was only ever meant to be 3. Dan, stop giving your great ideas away. Jenna says it was really good. Okay, so if you guys have Hulu, check out The Great. You got 3 episodes. All right. Any fans of Our Flag Means Death? I've only watched 1 episode. I thought it was pretty funny. I watched it with Lisa. She didn't find the humor that funny, so I haven't got around to watching any more. I mean to. But I've got a good friend of mine, Irene, and if you follow my Pop Go the Writers, she's the one that comes on and we do the Mannix deep dives. Well, she is a huge fan of this series, and by being friends with her on Twitter, I'm connected to this group of very zealous OFMD fans. They go to conventions, they share pictures they take with the cat. It is diehard fans out there. So if you haven't checked it out, you might want to. This is pretty much, they refer to it as the Gay Pirate Show. And it's really funny. It's got a really funny, dry humor, and it stars Rhys Darby and Taika Waititi. So now Max has dropped a trailer for season 2. It's going to be an 8-episode season, but you're going to get 3 episodes on the night of the premiere, which will be October 5th, so it's coming up soon. And then they'll drop 2 episodes each night until October 26th, when you'll get the finale. Now, if you're not familiar with this is a story of Steve Bonnet, played by Darby, and his feelings for Ed, who is also known as Blackbeard the Pirate, and that's Taika Waititi. The interesting thing is, it's based on a true story-ish. There really was a pirate in the 18th century named Stede Bonnet who had a charmed life. He was a gentleman and a landowner and all that stuff. And he gave it all up, left his wife and kids to become a swashbuckler, and was really bad at it. His whole crew was about to mutiny when they happened on the infamous Captain Blackbeard, and he and Blackbeard are very different. And in trying to deal with each other, they find more than a friendship. So yeah, it is a very interesting show. Might want to check that out. Jenna says it was about their relationship, and if anyone knows history and what happened, that's how it ended. Okay. Any Lincoln Lawyer fans? I've watched all of season 1. I'm just one episode into season 2. This is based on the Michael Connelly book series, just as Bosch is, if you're a fan of the Titus Welliver Bosch series. Or you might have seen the Matthew McConaughey Lincoln Lawyer series movie. Well, this has just had a second season drop recently. Like I said, I'm watching it, but the third season has already been greenlit for 10 episodes. So this is moving well. Netflix has had real good luck with it. It was in the top 10 in 81 countries. So that's doing pretty good. Now, this third season is going to be based on the book The Gods of Guilt, which is the 5th book in the Lincoln Lawyer series. It stars Manuel Garcia Rulfo as Mickey Holler, an iconoclastic idealist who runs his law practice out of the back seat of his Lincoln as he takes on cases big and small across the city of Los Angeles. That's the show pitch. What's interesting is when McConaughey did the movie, it was an old Lincoln Continental type. It was a big old car, and now he's driving around the back of a Lincoln SUV. So that loses a little bit, but the rest of it's pretty good. The second season, if you're curious, was based on the 4th book in the series called The Fifth Witness. And like I said, I'm 1 episode in, but it's already got a good twist in the first episode. So, any fans of the Wesley Snipes Blade series? If you have not had a chance to watch that in a while, like you don't own the disc and want to, they're going to pop up on Max starting September 1st. Now, this is part of a streaming deal that they have that also, like when Avatar and Avatar the Way of Water and stuff show up on Max, even though they're owned by Disney. Well, the last time anybody could have seen this was in October of last year, but they were only on Hulu for 2 months. They started in October and were off by the end of the year. So, but if you want to see Blade, check out Hulu. Let's see. Jay says, any of the series that are out that you're a fan of, what series would you like to write for, Dan? TV series wise, write for. A lot of the series I wanted to write for have ended. I was a big fan of White Collar, Leverage, Arrow. Love The Witcher, but I don't know what's going on with that. Lincoln Lawyer would be fun. Would love to write for Reacher, or if they do anything with Jack Ryan going forward. I absolutely love Our Flag Means Death. Not Our Flag Means Death. Only Murders in the Building. But that is so tightly written and so written for those characters that I don't know if I'd want to jump in on that one. So, all right. Got to have an SUV in LA because of all those unpaved roads. Yes, it's horrible. That's why I drive a 4x. Yeah, actually, I do drive a 4x, but it's mainly because it was the biggest vehicle I could find that I fit into comfortably. All right. Speaking to the Hollywood Reporter, before the strike began, David Harbour talked about how he really has no idea what's going on with the Thunderbolts as the strike was approaching. He said, there will be a little bit of push difference, but Stranger Things 5 will shoot for a year, so Thunderbolts will have to live somewhere within that. But the whole thing is crazy speculation at this point. I just don't know what anything is anymore. I don't know what we're doing. I really wish that somebody in charge could tell me what's going on, because I get tons of phone calls every week that say, oh, this is what's going to happen, and then it doesn't happen. So nobody knows. It's just I'm just so depressed that we can't resolve these things. I don't know what the end game of any of this is. It seems so insane to me that there are these sticking points, and of course, I don't know the nuances of any of this, but I've heard that there are no guarantees that AI won't replace you. And it seems so insane to me that a human being would enter a room and say that to each other. The whole thing seems wild. So I really want to get back to work, but I also really want people to be paid their due. I really want them to feel good about how they work in the industry. And I really want all of us to get back to work, because not working is exhausting. So, all right. One last news story, and then we'll take a break. If you're a fan of the Harley Quinn animated series, we got a little Easter egg in there. In season 4, episode 6, The Metamorphosis, Harley goes looking for Poison Ivy at the Legion of Doom headquarters, and in the background you see Two-Face. Well, standing next to Two-Face are Sugar and Spice, and they are drawn exactly as the characters appeared 28 years ago in Batman Forever, when they were played by Drew Barrymore and Debbie Mazar. Now, they're not voiced by those characters. I don't even think they speak. I think they're just an Easter egg in the background. But it's really kind of interesting to see those two characters pop up next to Two-Face, because we haven't seen them other than, I think one of them shows up in a video game. Other than that, we haven't seen them in a very long time. So, all right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, my top 20 comic book villains of all time. Be right back.
Join the party. Head over to our Linktree to find all the links for everywhere the experience is all the time.
Comic Collectibles is a pretty straightforward show. You got Rex here, he sells the comics, and you got Rockin' Robbie, he knows about the comics. And finally, John, well, no one really knows what John does. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a great guy, but he just keeps showing up. Come to think of it, I don't even really know how he gets in here. Anyway, awesome comics, rare books, rarer signatures, slabbed books, and amazing cover sketches by Ken Hazer and others. Simple formula, you want the comics, you buy the comics. To sum up, Rex sells the comics, Robbie knows the comics, and John, who might possibly be a ghost. I mean, seriously, has anyone ever seen him show up or leave? Comic Collectibles with Rex and John, Mondays from 6 to 8 Eastern on The Experience. Comic Culture and Sales.
According to a statistic that I just made up, people spend 4 hours a day changing the television channel. People who watch The Experience don't do that. Save yourself a ton of time by tuning into The Experience and enjoying our new original programming 7 days a week. And then tell your friends. Think about the money they could save on batteries in the remote alone just by tuning into The Experience. Find out more by scanning the QR code below.
Welcome back to the Dan Wickline Show. I see Ed has finally arrived. How insensitive of the people running the meeting to have it run long. I don't even know what to do with those people. Hey to Kenneth, how you doing? All right, we are going to do the top 20 villains of all time from comic books. Like I said, we're not doing anti-heroes, so no Harley Quinn, no Venom, no Catwoman. And we're sticking with comic books, because if I made a bigger list, Moriarty would be on here, Darth Vader would be on here, but those are outside of the comic book genre. So we're looking at the comic book genre. So, but before we get into it, please hit the like and subscribe buttons that are down here somewhere. And remember to stick around. We got a good lineup today. We got Comic Collectibles starting at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. We have Talk and Treat Trivia with Chuck, And then we have Kicking It with Henri later tonight. So we got a good lineup here. Stick around for all of that. All right, let's get to our top 20 villains. And I'm going to start with Ultron. Ultron, I loved as a villain. He was created by John Buscema and Roy Thomas in Avengers number 54. And what I like about him is the personal connection. And I think that's what I like about a lot of the villains, is that they need to mean something more to the hero than just a bad guy. There's a lot of bad guys out there that are just bad guys. You know, Condiment King. Condiment King's just a bad guy. Batman has no connection to him. But there are some villains he is much more connected to because there's a personal connection. Ultron, and they did something in the comics, or in the comics, he's created by Hank Pym, and he's connected to Hank Pym. He creates a bride in Jocasta that uses the brainwaves of Janet Van Dyne. So there's a lot of personal area there. Well, they didn't have Hank as an active member of the Avengers when they decided to do Ultron. So they made him built by Bruce Banner and Tony Stark. And that makes a lot more sense for what they're doing in the movies. And I don't think it takes away from the character that much. It's still somewhat personal. I don't think it's quite as personal as he is in the comics. And there's something that always makes me laugh. They're talking about Kang right now, and somehow Kang didn't make my list. He would be honorable mention, but Kang's not on the list. But there's a lot of people complaining that Kang got beat by Ant-Man. And the majority of these characters get beaten. It's what happens. They go up against a hero and the hero wins. Otherwise, there would be no new issue. These characters lose. It's what they do. It doesn't make them less badass. You know, you can ramp up the threat each time. They learn from their mistakes. They get better and stuff like that. Ultron is a great example of that. He learns, he improves, and they never seem to beat him the same way twice. So, all right. Let's go on to number 19 and kneel before Zod. Now, I didn't realize that this character was created much later on. This is actually created by Robert Bernstein and George Papp in Adventure Comics number 283. I kind of thought he'd be a Siegel and Schuster creation. But nope, it was a later group that when they really wanted to focus on Krypton. And he would be kind of a classic Marvel or MCU villain in that here is a character with the exact same power set as the hero he takes on, which is interesting because you get a character like Superman who is so overpowered that there has to be something about the villain that puts them on the same level. And Superman, I mean, there's always talk like Superman should go up against Batman's villains. No, they're not on the same level. Superman should go up against the Flash's villains. No, they're not on the same level. It is completely different. A good Superman villain would beat the living crap out of Batman and the Flash and just about everybody else in the DC. They need to be on that level, whether it's intellect, it's resources, or just outright power. And General Zod is that level. And unlike some other villains in the Superman pantheon, they've done a really good job with General Zod, making him a real threat, making his plans legit. I do like Michael Shannon's take on the character, Terrence Stamp's take on the character. I think Zod is a really great villain. And just that line, kneel before Zod, is so classic. All right, moving on to number 18, Doc Ock. Yep. Alfred Molina did a great job playing the character. Was able to make him less goofy. I always looked at Doc Ock as being kind of a goofy character from the comics. It wasn't until seeing him in the Tobey Maguire movies that I stopped and kind of rethought the character and what he has. And the arms are kind of secondary. It's his intellect, his determination. You know, he really is a good foil for Spider-Man, because most of what makes Spider-Man excel is negated by what Doc Ock can do. He's smarter than Spider-Man. He's better strategist, and his arms balance the playing field. So, like I said, it does appear as kind of a silly character when you first look at it, and there's a lot of Spider-Man villains that look serious or look silly at first, but the writing is what brings it together. This was created by Steve Ditko and Stan Lee, and Steve Ditko had a weird design sense. His stuff was just really out there, but the actual threat comes from the types of things that he has done in the pages of the comics. Give me 1 second. Bit of a hiccup starting there. All right, going on to number 17. And this is another interesting one. This is Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin. When he started, he was very different. He was just a big, heavy mob boss that was more muscle than fat, even though you couldn't tell. He was created by Stan Lee and John Romita, and this happened in the pages of Amazing Spider-Man number 50. But nobody cared about the Kingpin. It wasn't until Frank Miller took over Daredevil and decided to take the character. And there's this great story. I don't remember who told him how to do this. I want to say it was Denny O'Neil or John Byrne. But the issue where he becomes a Daredevil villain, he starts off looking like John Romita's take on the character. He's well lit and just looks like the big heavyset guy. And then he walks over to the window and there's blinds, and Frank Miller goes from drawing him like John Romita to drawing him like Frank Miller, with the heavy shadows and the lines from the blinds, light coming through the blinds. And in that switch, that total style change, Kingpin became a Daredevil villain, and he became much more serious. And now he's one of the most popular villains. Vincent D'Onofrio's version of him, how he's done in the comics. He's a great foil for Daredevil. So much better than he ever was for Spider-Man. All right, going to number 16, this is another character with the exact same power set. Reverse Flash, Zoom, Eobard Thawne, whatever you want to talk about. I'll recap the list before I get to the end. This was created by Carmine Infantino and John Broome. This is one of 2 entries for John Broome on this list. He showed up in Flash 139. And he's a very interesting character because he comes from the future. So he's got Flash's power, but that's not the only thing. He comes from the future, and he is pretty much psychopathic or psychotic. He's just crazy. He's willing to do anything. And there's been different versions of him. The Zoom or the Zolomon version. But looking at just Eobard Thawne, he was such a Flash fan, and then he wanted to, go after the Flash. I think in a lot of ways it was the CW series that really brought this character to a higher attention. Because he was probably just another rogue. Captain Cold, Captain Boomerang, Mirror Master, they were all kind of on that same level. And what they did with him in the TV series was made him pretty much lethal. Where all the other ones seem to have that little level they wouldn't pass. Thawne doesn't. Thawne will go past it. All right, we got to speed up a little bit here. Number 15 is Brainiac, created by Al Pacino and Otto Binder in Action Comics number 242. I really like the character, but I really loved him in Krypton. I thought they did a really great job with the character. And he's one of those that I think they really need to use him as the Superman villain. Put Lex Luthor aside for a while. Go with Brainiac. Put Superman against Brains. And I think that's a better choice. All right. Then we're going to do Ra's al Ghul. Ra's al Ghul is great because he's created by Denny O'Neil, Julius Schwartz, and Neil Adams in Batman 232. And while we look at stuff like Zenescope right now, doing all this Cthulhu-based Lovecraft stuff, this character has a huge Lovecraft influence. The name Ra's al Ghul, the demon's head, the intellectual level, the referring to Batman as the detective, that is all very Lovecraftian. And we can pull that back and see where that came from. And it didn't come from Denny O'Neil or Neil Adams. It came from editor Julius Schwartz, who before Schwartz joined DC Comics, he worked as a book publisher or promoter and publisher. He was like a book agent. That's the word I want, book agent. And one of the people that he was an agent for was H.P. Lovecraft. He was heavily influenced by Lovecraft and brought in a Lovecraftian villain, who I think is probably the best counter to Batman. All of the Batman's villains counter a part of the character. I think Ra's al Ghul is the best overall villain for Batman. From there, we got Red Skull, of course, created in the same issue as Captain America Comics #1 by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. And we've seen what a great villain this is. Hugo Weaving did a great job with the character in First Avenger. He has been a staple for the Marvel industry, for Marvel Comics for years. And sometimes you just need a Nazi to punch. You know, why is he a bad guy? He's a Nazi. That's all you need. So, all right, moving on to number 12, Ozymandias. Now, Ozymandias, of course, created by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons in Watchmen #1. He is the one that's kind of outside the two main continuities, or normally he is. He, of course, was originally based off of Pete Cannon Thunderbolt. And this is the only, I didn't have anti-heroes on here. This is the only hero to do something so evil that he gets on this list. And he basically decided to kill a bunch of people to save humanity. And it's like, yeah, that's pretty up there. Yeah. If you haven't seen Watchmen or read it, you should. Deathstroke, the Terminator, Slade Wilson, created by Marv Wolfman and George Perez in New Teen Titans #2. This is just a great physical character. He's kind of Captain America and Punisher merged together. He's, well, there'll be dispute, but he's pretty much the impetus or the influence for Deadpool. And the fact that he always goes up against the Teen Titans. It's like he should be against Batman or some higher, but now he goes against the kids. So I think that makes him extra evil. All right, let me recap the top 20 real quick. Ultron, Zod, Dr. Octopus, Kingpin, Reverse Flash, Brainiac, Ra's al Ghul, Red Skull, Ozymandias, and Deathstroke. And now we're going to get into the top 10. We're going to go with Thanos. And Thanos, I think, has always been a good villain since the Infinity Saga in the comics, and even better since the movies. I think Josh Brolin brought a lot to the character, but I think Jim Starlin put a lot of it there. You know, it's kind of the merging of the two. Starlin and Mike Friedrich created the character in Invincible Iron Man #55. And he was such a very different character when he started. He was going around in a helicopter, for God's sakes. But now he is a big galactic cosmic villain who's in love with death. And of course, what inspired Jim Starlin to make this? Our number 9, Darkseid. Darkseid, of course, being the creation of Jack Kirby and showing up in all places, Superman's pal number 134. Now, he was introduced in Superman's pal, as I said yesterday, because Jack wanted to give this the biggest possible audience. So instead of introducing him in the Forever People, stuff like that, or Mr. Miracle or the New Gods, he put him in Jimmy Olsen, which had a bigger base audience, in the hopes that would then bring people over. And while they never really caught on, Darkseid as a character has been growing and growing in the DCU to where he's now the big bad. And he's a pretty interesting character. There's a whole mythos that Jack Kirby created that I kind of wish there was a talk about them doing the New Gods as a movie. I wish they would go back to that. I think it deserves it, especially a standalone away from the DC universe. Number 8, doing the flip thing again, Sinestro, created by Gil Kane and John Broome, his other entry. Green Lantern number 7. I love this character because he was the greatest Green Lantern until Hal Jordan. And then he went and found his own core and his own ring that uses fear. And he's such an interesting character, the militant background. I really want to play with his psychology, like I've done the other psychology videos. Sinestro is one of the ones I'm looking at. But he hasn't really been played much in live action. He's got Mark Strong portrayed him at one point, but there really isn't a lot of, he hasn't shown up in a lot of cartoons, stuff like that. But I think he's a great villain and a great foil for Green Lantern, who is all about willpower. All right, after that, we get Loki. And some people will say that Loki's an anti-hero, but that's only in the MCU. In the comics, he's a bad guy. He was created by Stan Lee, Stan's brother Larry Lieber, and Jack Kirby in Journey into Mystery number 85. And Loki, again, he was always a twisted villain in the comics, but I think his popularity is because of Tom Hiddleston. Has done such an amazing job with that character that, that he's kind of overshadows even what's in the comics. After that, we have Galactus, who has really never been seen in live action. I say that knowing that he was supposed to be in Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer, but he's just a freaking cloud. So he's never been seen in live action. Now, we need Loki as a bad guy, not an in-betweener. I agree. It's funny that you say Crazy Quilt. He's not in the list, but we will be talking about him in a minute. Galactus is just this great, overpowered supervillain that I have a feeling they only meant to use once, but they keep bringing him back. And I can't wait till they actually do a good live-action version of him. At number 5, we have Green Goblin, another character that is super silly when you first look at it. This is Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, Amazing Spider-Man number 14. But they put so much into Norman Osborn, his connection to Peter, all of that stuff. And then just the things that he has done is what's made him this almost Joker-level villain for Spider-Man. It's made him the top Spider-Man villain. And Willem Dafoe did a great job with the character. So he's just, he's a fun character. He'd be a fun one to write. All right, number 4, the most misunderstood one, Lex Luthor, created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster in Action Comics number 23. When he's written as a narcissist or with narcissistic personality disorder, he is incredible. When he's written as a megalomaniac, then obviously the writer doesn't get it. This guy wants to be he wants to be loved by Metropolis. He hates the fact that Superman has stolen his thunder and he has the resources to cause problems. It's why every once in a while he flips to good, but then he flips back because this guy is just a narcissist. This one I did a full video on, and if you haven't seen it, you should take a look. Number 3, Magneto. Magneto's so cool that he's been played by 2 different actors as the same version, and people love it. Michael Fassbender and Ian McKellen. He has such an angsty backstory, the whole concentration camp thing, that there are times that you question whether he is a villain, and then he'll do something so villainous that you're like, yeah, he's definitely a villain. He wants to destroy all humanity. I can't wait to see what Marvel does with him, what their version of the character is. Number 2, we get the all-time best Marvel villain, Dr. Doom. Created by Lee and Kirby, as was Magneto. In Fantastic Four number 5, he is the one that I am waiting for the most. And like Lex Luthor, they have yet to get him right in live action. What they have done has been so abysmal in the 2 previous outings that they really need to nail it this time or give up. So, and finally, the number 1 villain in comics has to be the Joker. Just such an intense character. Even when played poorly, he's still super intense. But he's been played very well. He's always written very well. He is evil incarnate with no morality and no sanity. So, all right, we are going to skip our final break and go right into our key issues. Yeah, not the stupid cut my own face joke. I didn't like the cut my own face part. If there's one question I could ask the king, it would be, what is up with Galactus' helmet? Such a bizarre style. Jack loved those big designs and stuff. That was his thing. You can see it in the Celestials. You can see it in the New Gods. It was just his image of cosmic. So, all right, these are key villains that Jack Kirby created. And we're going to go through these. Creating Dr. Doom in Fantastic Four number 5. This goes for $52,000 on the high end, $19,000 on the median, $5,500 on the low end. And you're going to see Marvel ones are much higher in price than DC. Now, Darkseid was credited as first appearing in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, but it was cameos. His first full appearance, which is what I always consider to be the first appearance, The Forever People number 1 from 1971. You could pick this up for $180 on the high end, $60 on the median, $18 on the low end. You would think that would be a lot higher in price. Uncanny X-Men number 1, of course, first appearance of Magneto, goes for $85,000. So again, Marvel villains versus DC villains. Median price is $14,000, low end $6,200. And then Granny Goodness is one of the most demented villains. And the fact that she always gets played by somebody like Ed Asner in the animated series, I think is great. High end on this is only $120. Median's $4, low end is $12. She is such a demented character that I love it. Yeah. All right. After that, we have first appearance of Hela. I didn't do Loki because we've done Loki recently. I didn't do Galactus because we've done Galactus recently. First appearance of Hela was in Journey into Mystery number 102. This goes for about $450 on the high end, $150 in the median, $40 on the low end. Did you know that Jack Kirby created the character of Cobra, who's head of his own Serpent Society thing, and that he debuted in his own comic in 1976, and it goes for about $15 on the high end, $5 on the median, low end is $1. MODOK, another. How do you look at MODOK and not know it's a Jack Kirby creation? It's like Super Adaptoid. It's like, yep, that's a Kirby. Tales of Suspense number 94. High end is $400, median's $120, low end is $40. Morgane Le Fay, based on Morgana Le Fay. First appearance was in The Demon number 1. This is one of the books he did after he started the New Gods, and they weren't selling that well. He did a few more books over at DC. Demon being one of them. This goes for $175 on the high end, $60 on the medium, $15 on the low. So if you're looking for Jack Kirby books, the DC ones are still very reasonable. Then we have Annihilus, another great FF villain, shows up in Fantastic Four Annual number 6 in 1968. The ruler of the negative zone. This goes for $1,900 new, or a high end, $600 in the median, $160 on the low end. And finally, here he is, Ed requested Crazy Quilt. Yes, Jack Kirby created Crazy Quilt. He was not originally a Batman villain. He was a villain for the Boy Commandos. He showed up in number 15 in 1946. And this goes for $385 on the high end, $105 on the median, $35 on the low end. So those are some of our Jack Kirby creations. Let me catch up on the comments here. JD says, I feel like until the late 90s, Doc Ock was Spidey's number 1 villain. Since then, it's been Gobby. I won't disagree with you on that. I think that's pretty fair. Center 24 says, well, I guess it's a good thing if you're a DC fan. True. JD says, he's painting the town red. And Ed says, wow, great trivia. I didn't know that. Yeah, Crazy Quilt is just one of those characters that it's a pure Jack Kirby creation. Two of the biggest names in the early days of Marvel, Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko, had very odd design aesthetics. And you look at some of the characters, you know, I mean, I posted on Facebook the other day something that I reposted, something I had written back in like 2019, that I would love to do a buddy cop or like a detective miniseries starring Etrigan the Demon and the Creeper, because I think they're two of the most bizarre designs from Kirby and Ditko, and I think it would be a lot of fun to have them like investigating a murder that somehow ties into the underworld. So you have both of them working on it. I think it would be fun to have those two interact. The Demon with his constant rhyming and the Creeper with his insanity. But, you know, those two, the extremes. Look, he's not conforming into normal society. Kill him, 50s children. Yeah, pretty much. Actually, Kirby and Simon did a lot with children in comics. The Newsboy Legion, the Boy Commandos. I mean, and then they went to other companies and created ones as well. So a squad of kids doing heroic things. I don't think we would even get, the closest thing we get that now is the Teen Titans. And they all look like they're adults. Yeah, I don't even know if they're teens anymore. It's hard to tell. I think Robin is the youngest one. But all right, guys, we have pushed this one to the absolute edge. Thank you for tuning in. Tomorrow we will talk about the 3rd episode of Ahsoka, and we'll have some other fun stuff. We'll have the news, some key collectibles, and so tune in tomorrow. Stick around for all the great stuff we've got here, and I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night.
Do you remember what it was like when you were a little kid and you got a letter in the mail? Now imagine that letter was filled with information about your favorite shows, pop culture questions, links to things you're going to want to see later, and even sneak peeks at upcoming programming here on The Experience. That's what the EXP mailing list is. Every week, we send you sneak peeks, information, and all of the relevant links for all of the shows you want to see. Sign up now on our website or scan the QR code that's on your screen right now.